those songs got me going. I hope they did you as well. I only requested the last one too. That was kind of the lesser of the three, I'd say, as far as upbeat, but all three of them were great. Do I need to turn it on here? This is an interesting slide, isn't it? Who's ever seen this movie? All right. What's the Z stand for? Zombies. I told you I love zombies. You put a zombie in a movie, I'm watching it. Anyway, we had the day off last Thursday because of Veterans Day. And after lunch, this movie was on TV. And I've seen it tons of times. In fact, I love it. I think it's a good movie. And it's very interesting. Obviously, it's fiction. But it kind of goes with our lesson, believe it or not. Believe it or not. Do what? Well, I hope we just don't have this one slide on here forever. There we go. This is part of the movie. This is Jerusalem's wall. Now, it's not the real wall, so don't get too excited. This is the movie wall in Jerusalem where they built it to keep the zombies out. So there is some correlation. It's not a great correlation. And here's the human zombie ladder to get over the wall. And obviously, you know what happens. The wall doesn't protect them. The zombies end up going over the wall and basically making zombies of everybody in Jerusalem. So, but anyway, I thought that was interesting because it's the wall. Now, obviously, the wall that Nehemiah builds is based on what God wants him to do, based on what God. This is just fiction, and obviously nothing. There's just another picture of the human zombie ladder that gets built. Okay, but anyway, thought that would start us out with a good laugh. But in Psalms 127, it says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who built it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain." And obviously, we know that Nehemiah is building this wall with God behind him, with God's blessing. We understand, as we've talked many times in my class, prayer is throughout Nehemiah. Every time it seems like he takes a short break, there's problems happening in his life, he prays. He does just short prayers, just wonderful short prayers. Such a great example. And obviously, we can say that the people are building the wall, and they are physically, but ultimately, the providence of God is allowing this to happen. And we're going to read tonight that it only took 52 days to build this wall. And obviously, the wall was somewhat still there, so it was improvements some places. Some places they had to restructure the whole wall, as I think Stacy's class talked about. But basically, it's the providence of God, and ultimately, the protection is what the wall affords the city of Jerusalem. And Stacy had talked last time, and I just want to kind of paraphrase what he ended with, but we're in Nehemiah 6, and we're actually going to start in 10, but I wanted to review 1 through 9. You might remember that the Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and some others were basically trying again to foil the plan of Nehemiah to protect this city. In fact, if you recall, a letter was sent out, an open letter, which basically, as Stacy pointed out, messengers could read it because it was open. Those who came in contact could read it. And basically, it was to demoralize the whole situation, to say, oh, well, Nehemiah is just doing this for his own benefit. He wants to be king of Jerusalem. He wants to rule over this area. You know, not only will you get in trouble with your own people and the surrounding people, you'll get in trouble with the Persian Empire with something like that. But it's all made up. And if you remember, 4 times he sent this letter, and on the 5th time, He actually had it delivered. And can you imagine Nehemiah sitting there just shaking his head going, what are you talking about? This is all fake. This is all wrong. This is never what happened. Ever. Has this ever been set in my mind to be what was going to happen? You can just imagine him thinking that way. And he just sends it back and just replies and said, nothing like that's going on. I'm not going to meet with you. You're not going to thwart our work in this completion of this wall. We're going to get it done, and quit bothering me. You know, sometimes you have to have good relationships, but eventually relationships with the outside has to be stopped, and at this time that's what had to happen. But let's pick up kind of where we left off, and you might recall, you know, nothing's easy in life, and we know with Nehemiah coming back, he had to get the king's permission, which king gladly gave to him to start the wall. He came back, was upset. We know how many times he had to contemplate what he was doing. We understand the things that he was going through. We understand that not only did he find himself fighting with those on the outside, but he came into the fact that he was seeing his own countrymen taking advantage of those less fortunate in his... my tabs disappear on this. I think they're getting old, so I can't find my place, but here it is. But what happens is he's fighting all kinds of things. But again, he does these short prayers. God's providence is working in the background, and so things are happening, and he sees it. All the people see what's going on. So they understand, and they are happy to help out, and everything really, really goes along. So let's kind of read here in 6, beginning in verse 10 again, where Stacy had let off. In fact, I want to go just back up there to that last prayer in verse 9. For they all wanted to frighten us, thinking, their hands will drop from the work, and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands. Just a real quick prayer there, something that we can do. 10, now when I went into the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, son of Mehatabah, who was confined to his home, he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. They are coming to kill you by night. Now, obviously, this man, we'll read, doesn't have a proper motive in doing this. Again, there's some relationships that have been established with the Samaritans, Sanballat, with Tobiah, and these relationships are affecting even those within, those people that are supposed to be dependable with Nehemiah, those Jews that are within the wall. And here we have another man. He's already tried to thwart this letter that keeps coming from Sanballat, but now he's got to fight with a priest within. And going on, but I said, should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in. And I understand and saw that God had not sent him, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me because Tobiah the Sanballat had hired him. For this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin, and so they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, O my God, according to these things that they did, and also the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. So you see, it just keeps coming at him and coming at him. And isn't that just the same thing we experience as Christians? You know, whatever it is, you know, if you're around other people that are wanting to have good times and do stuff that we know is wrong, you know, they just keep hitting you and hitting you. Come with us, come with us. You know, or maybe you're trying to do right. Maybe you're trying to do right in the Lord, and then all of a sudden you've got the baggage of maybe, yeah, it could be your family. You know, it could be your closest friends that just don't go for Christianity, and therefore they keep hitting you back and back and back. And we see where now Nehemiah's, you know, it's not even friendly people. It's outside, but it's also, I should say, it is also friendly people, the Jews that are also hitting him hard as far as trying to get this done, trying to get it complete. So we've got to understand, sometimes we have to stand firm, we have to stand right. And again, there you go with the short prayer. You know, he knows where his strength is. And that's why I had Brennan sing that last song, you know, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And Nehemiah just shows us over and over. not only do prayers reach out to God for help, but they comfort you, don't they? Sometimes a little talk with a friend is what you need in life, just to get yourself back up on. And God is our friend. He's our Father. He's our protector. He's our salvation. And so anytime we talk to him, we should be comforted, and just as Nehemiah is. And then all of a sudden we go into 15, and such a great thing, because my title to this section is "The Wall is Finished." And just incredible how fast this wall was put up, in 52 days. But let's read there in 15. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month, Elul, in the 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. You remember back in Deuteronomy when they had conquered Jericho, and how many people had heard of that? A lot. In fact, you even go back further when they had conquered Og and I can't remember the other king. Somebody help me on that. Og and is it Sihon? But everybody heard about that too. And all of a sudden the fear of the Lord started spreading back when they were conquering the promised land. Do you remember that? They heard these stories. They heard what was happening. And I wouldn't be surprised if all these people, the people around, whether it be the countries of Samaria or Arabia or whatever, they probably knew a lot of those stories as well. But they also saw what was going on here. The Jews were able to build this wall in 52 days. And so they knew there was more than just these people building this wall. They knew God was involved. And we've got so many references where everybody was fearful. We remember, I think it was Rahab, right? She knew. She hid the spies because she was concerned about the safety of her family, because she knew what was going to happen to Jericho based on the fact they had God behind them. So basically these nations were scared. They were fearful. And again, we think this was approximately August, September, based on the Jewish calendar, the 6th month being somewhere in our August or September. And it had been less than 6 months since he had spoke to the king. So in 6 months, not only did he get permission to leave the main Persian city, capital city, but he is also able to come to Jerusalem and ultimately build the wall, make the arrangements within a 6-month period. So not only is 52 days amazing, but the fact he was able to travel, get everything arranged to even start the wall within a 6-month period and get it completed within 52 days. So just extraordinary. The nations were afraid. And, the only thing you could perceive is that God was helping them. And that's why Tobiah, that's why Sanballat, they wanted to stop this. Partly because they knew the strength of God. They knew if they continued to be faithful and do what they were supposed to do, that with God behind them, nobody can stop them. And we should understand that same thing. With God behind us, with God's strength, we have no enemies. Because if God's on our side, who can be against us? Let's go on with 17 there. Moreover, in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. Again, we got the nobles, the Jews, the hierarchy. They're flirting with disaster. They're basically going behind. And again, Nehemiah is having to work not only outside forces, but the outside forces are able to talk to those inside forces and just make some incredible situations where Nehemiah has to overcome this. But they were sending letters. They were going back and forth with Tobiah. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Era, and the son of Johanan, had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, as his wife. Also they spoke of the good deeds of my presence and reported my words to him. And Tobiah sent letters to make me afraid. And we can see where sometimes, what did God say when they went into the promised land? Do not marry those nations that you're about to conquer. The Jebusites, the Canaanites, whateverites, You're not to marry them. And guess what they did? They did marry him. And who was the ultimate downfall? And we see here where, a marriage to outside for, we in Kids Sing, we talk about marrying a Christian. And the reason we say that is because how much easier, how much safer are you? And I'm not saying it works out that every time, but just the influence two Christians can have together on life's path to heaven is so much greater than if you married outside the church. And that's why we encourage the kids to do that. I'm not saying there's a command that we have to marry a Christian, but why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you have that as your goal? And that way you both have the same goal in life and you're not consistently fighting. And unfortunately, it seems like when there's a battle about religions, many times the false religion seems to always win out, unfortunately. And that's just our human nature. Sometimes what happens when you can relax God's rules makes it feel a little bit better, like we can have more fun or whatever. But as Christians, we understand the true blessing and peace in life is in God and Christ, and that's where we want to be. So we see where these marriages have affected the hierarchy, the nobles, and the fact that they're connecting with Tobiah, and again, trying to make Nehemiah afraid, trying to thwart the efforts of building this wall and continuing to maintain it. And so we've got those issues that keep arising and coming up. And again, you can just imagine, Nehemiah's getting all this done, everything's happening, and all of a sudden he's hearing all this back talk. Everybody's talking behind his back, the nobles, the countrymen. And these are the same nobles that, if you remember a couple lessons ago, were the ones that were oppressing. And when Nehemiah confronted them, they were silent. They didn't have anything to say. They knew they were being wrong. They knew they were not doing proper. And so ultimately, obviously Nehemiah stayed the course. And that's what we have to do in life, is stay the course no matter what kind of backlash we get from our friends, relatives, those that we hold close and dear that might not be on the right track. So we've got to understand that. John?
A couple quick points. All of the great leaders in the Bible always face tremendous opposition. Think of Noah, think of what Moses went through. Think all of the challenges that Abraham actually faced. So we would expect Nehemiah, being a godly man, face challenges. And
Sure.
The story that we get, the lesson we get is that we're going to be trying to be godly people. We're going to face opposition.
Right.
Which brings up a second point. Where did Nehemiah get his strength? He didn't have a whole lot of people at his level that were at God's fearing. So it's always been amazing to me, where did he get the heart of commitment? And maybe that happened before he ever left, the king's palace. Maybe he was brought up in a family that emphasized godly living.
Right. And that's what I would think happened. I mean, raise a child in the way he'll go, and he'll not depart from that. So, I mean, that has to be where it's from, as far as that solid foundation that he had since the beginning of the book, to see him have that thoughts. But those are good thoughts about Nehemiah and how we face it. And we talked about it Sunday. We went to church in Dallas, Texas, and they had talked about similar things about just being your back against the wall and just putting your trust in God. And that's what we have to do. We have to have that comfort. We have to have that stand up for God thoughts and processes, and just love those around us, but not participate with what they want to do. So, well, let's go on to 7. And I hate rushing through this, but we don't have a lot of time, and we're kind of behind. And I thought about asking Stacy to read this whole chapter, because it's got a lot of names that I just absolutely cannot pronounce. And if you remember, 4 weeks ago, Stacy did one of the most fantastic jobs I've ever seen anybody read these names. And I don't know how you are, but when I read hard names consistently, I get to easy names, and I can't pronounce those after I've been tongue-twisted with the hard ones. So, well, we're just going to touch on a couple verses in this one. So I'm going to let y'all read 7 at home, and you all decipher those. It's always good to have a video, or not a video, or video or audio, to go through these names, and that way you kind of get a better understanding how to pronounce everything. But I wanted to just focus on a few things. Obviously, 1 through 4, we can go ahead and read, since there's I don't think any name, well, a couple names, but not too hard. Now when the wall had been built, and again, this is after it's been built, and I set up the doors and the gatekeepers and the singers. And if y'all remember, in the law of Moses, you know, the tribe of Levi, we think of the priests, and basically you go from the Levites to Aaron, and that's where the priests come from. They have to be of Aaron's descent. They can't just be Levites, they have to be Aaron. But there's also a determination of other worship activities and temple activities that the Levites were made, and many of those were made gatekeepers. And the singers, they would actually be the ones that sing. And so we kind of see a contrast to the Old Testament way of worship that Nehemiah is again establishing that's proper because it's the Mosaic law, where we're all are singers. You know, we all sing one to another. We're congregational singers. You know, we don't have somebody get up in front of us and sing for worship. We're supposed to participate in that. But we see the contrast here. But again, we see where he is, you know, not only building this wall, but he's also designating the proper way of worship. We already know the temple's been built. The temple's been established. And so we have the singers, and the Levites have been appointed. I gave my brother Hananiah and Hananiah, the governor of the castle, charge over Jerusalem, for he was a more faithful and God-fearing man than many. And I said to them, let not the gates of Jerusalem be opened until the sun is hot, and while they are still standing guard, let them shut and bar the doors. Appoint guards from among the inhabitants of Jerusalem, some at their guard posts and some in front of their own homes. The city was wide and large, but the people within were few, and no houses had been rebuilt. And we've got to understand kind of the way the things were. The temple had been built, and the wall had been built, but few houses had been built. Now we know there were some because some of them were repairing the wall outside of their house to take care of it. So there were some, but there wasn't a lot, and we know there wasn't a lot of people in Jerusalem. A lot of people were coming from outside. If you remember, I think it was my class a couple weeks ago, that they were actually not letting them even change clothes. They were trying to keep them all in there, otherwise fearful they would leave, go outside, and not come back and help to finish it. So we see there, and ultimately we're going to read at the end of Nehemiah, where people were actually coming in to sell goods and do commercial trade during the Sabbath. And Nehemiah is going to say, shut the doors and say, listen, no, you don't come in here during the Sabbath, otherwise I'm going to put my hands on you. So we see where he's setting all this up to take care of it, and we see where it's going. And I wanted to make a point of this. Did it shut off, Eric? Okay. I wanted to just show a few events, and this goes back to Ezra. And understand, when you read the book of Ezra, it's actually over 100 years period. So even though Ezra came about 13 years before Nehemiah, the book of Ezra actually starts about 100 years before Nehemiah does. So I just wanted to show, but the edict from Cyrus was back in 539 BC, and this is where actually Cyrus says the Jews can go back to Jerusalem. And then we have the first year of Cyrus issued the proclamation, kind of in the same vein as that. The Jewish exiles led by Shalmaneser returned from Babylon to Jerusalem, 537, kind of in the same time period. Then they build the altar, 537. Temple rebuilding begins in 536. That's when it starts. So we're about 444 BC. So you see the time difference from the temple. Adversaries opposed the rebuilding, just like they did in Nehemiah. We've got the Samaritans basically making them build the temple. They send a letter to the next, after Cyrus, he tells them to quit building the temple. There's something going on, and then Artaxerxes, I believe it is, gets back into power, or goes into power, and they start back, so the rebuilding starts. And I think I'm off on the Persian Empire on that. Could you go to the next slide? Okay, temple rebuilding resumes, second year of Darius, there it goes, about 520. Temple construction completed about 516. So we see where the temple was done, and obviously the wall, we're about 444 BC right now. And there we have Ezra departs from Babylon to Jerusalem, arrives in the 7th year of Artaxerxes. So we've got a long span of time. But the reason I want to point this out is because even though they were stopped from building the temple, around 100 years, when they were able to resume, they didn't resume because they started building their houses. And all of a sudden, their whole focus during Ezra was on their own selves instead of the temple. And I thought it's very contrasting and revealing that Nehemiah, how great a leader he was with the people. They weren't even building anything. I mean, there was more houses to be built. There was more people to be settled in this region. But they weren't doing that. They were so focused on the wall, where these people back in temple construction all of a sudden lost their desire to build the temple, started taking care of their own stuff. But we see here where Nehemiah, they had continuously built the wall. And when you read about that in Ezra, and I hope you're reading Ezra as well, but you go back to Haggai too. Haggai, basically at the very first of Haggai, that's where he'll go against the people and say, quit thinking of only yourselves. The temple is still not built. Get back to the temple work. And so read those together. But I just find it contrasting how the wall is just the main purpose, gets built in 52 days. And we reflect back on the temple, they had basically been stopped, but they never returned to it until they were chastised about the fact they were focusing on themselves and not the Lord. So we see where that's occurring. Now the list of returned exiles, beginning in 5, then my God put into my heart to assemble the nobles and officials and the people to be enrolled by genealogy. And I found the book of genealogy of those who came up at the first, and I found written in it. And then, of course, we go into the names, which we won't get into. But genealogy in Jewish history is so important. If you don't know who's of the tribe of Levite, if you don't know who the descendants of Aaron are, you can't have priests. You cannot have priests. Now, they will have priests, and later on, we know that priests during Jesus' time weren't proper. But to be pleasing to God, he has designated who is supposed to be priests. So genealogy is so important. And before they lost the land, the promise of the land, they would come in and conquer the promised land. When Joshua had conquered the land, they designated who would have the tribes. The 12 tribes would have certain parts, and they designated. They give the layout. In fact, we can get maps that show where the tribe of Reuben is, the tribe of Manasseh, the tribe of so-and-so is. Well, they lost that. That was part of God's promise. You got to be faithful to me, otherwise you're going to lose and go into exile. That was important about genealogy. You might remember Moses basically a family had only girls. And so they were like, well, wait a second, the girls can't get the land, can they? And they said, yes, they can, but they have to marry in their own tribe, and that way the land stays in that certain tribe. So genealogy is so important to the Jewish nation. And here we have where the genealogy is being opened. In fact, that's why worship, the Jewish system, can no longer exist. Because when the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D., nobody knows what tribe they're from anymore. So we can't have priests. We don't know what tribe there is. So everything was destroyed, not only the temple in 70 A.D., but the genealogy. And that's why it's so important. That's why when you get into Chronicles and you read all that stuff, sometimes it gets monotonous to us, but it was so important to the Jews to know what tribe they were from and what their responsibilities to the Lord were. We see here where they're celebrating the Feast of Booths for the first time, and they set up the feast again and again. All this is Mosaic law as far as worship, as far as what they're supposed to be doing, as far as how they're supposed to be worshiping God, and all this is getting set up because the wall is finally built, the protection is there, the providence of God is working. And so this is really, just coming together as just a great thing for the Jews as far as worship, as far as being pleasing to God. And we're about out of time right now, so I'm going to end, and I think we're pretty well at a good place here to end. I'm just going to read this last part of 8, and we can start with 9. I'm sorry. I think I turned over too many pages. Never mind. I did want to go down to 66 on 7 and just state how many people came. The whole assembly together was 42,360, besides their male and female servants, of whom were 7,337. And they had singers, 245, male and female. Their horses were 736. Their mules were 245. Their camels, 435. And their donkeys, 6,720. And then we go down to 73. So the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, some of the people, the temple servants, and all Israel lived in their towns. And when the 7th month had came, the people of Israel were in their towns. And so next week, well, not next week, we have a devotional, but the week after, John will get into the fact that as they were normally supposed to do, they're supposed to read the law continuously, and John will get into that. But again, we're getting into that place where the wall's been built, and now they're in a position to, put everything in place for proper worship for God. And we'll continue in chapter 8 with next week. Or not next week, but in 2 weeks.